Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam Live. Ask is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. Knowledge of understanding more about ourselves, more about others, and the world around us. I have found in my life, and if you incorporate this in yours, you will find it as well, is just be inquisitive to understand a little bit more of what's happening. I think you will find more and more often that this will lead to this profound thing that I've discovered where life is happening for us and not to us. So I invite you to ask, to always seek knowledge. In this episode, we will rewire the voice, taming our inner critic. Now let's get on with the show. Rewire the voice, taming your inner critic. The voice in your head isn't always right. Unfortunately, it's the one that's most familiar. Quite frankly, if someone talked to you the way your inner critic does, well, you'd probably block their number now, wouldn't you? So that being said, everyone has an inner critic. And for many, it's not a kind one. I can certainly share with you from personal experience that I've had many battles with my inner critic. First of all, recognizing that there was even one there, let alone that it was giving me the best advice, and that I needed to, well, quite frankly, train it to give me better advice. Because what I was hearing was also, well, what I wanted to hear. And in training, you're going to have that voice start telling you things, well, that you didn't want to hear. But this is going to help give you alignment and help you see, well, what it is that you're actually after towards your goals. And like I said, at first, well, yeah, you're not going to like what it says. But if you've trained it to tell you the truth, and you begin to align that truth, then you start to see that, well, you are going towards your goals and that certain things that you do, behaviors, and your thought process, well, that's going to change. That's going to be a little different. And you are going to, well, start to improve and move towards those goals. I know mine used to drag me down continuously. And it wasn't that it was telling me that I couldn't do something. It was maybe that I could do it more than I thought I could, which gave me an immense amount of confidence going into something that I probably shouldn't have had. Now, again, I don't want to disrupt this or confuse anyone by saying that positive thinking is good. Over positive thinking is sometimes, well, a little boastful. And that's sometimes how I would come off. As well as it would remind me after kind of a failure that, well, it was expected because you didn't know as much as you thought you did. And that's where I shared with you coming in a little too confident can lead to a situation where you did have a failure and then that inner critic starts telling you, I told you so. And that's not the greatest conversation to have. And if you ignore the I told you so's and keep continuously moving forward by thinking and understanding that you did know better and not try to improve from that knowing better, well, you see how it can compound and kind of make things, well, worse. So let's learn a few steps on how we can tame that inner critic to not be so critical, but to also give us the best advice to be creatively critical that we can become the best. I guess what I'm saying is I promise in this episode that we'll uncover where the inner critic comes from, how to reframe it, and how to build a new voice rooted in truth and empowerment. Because that's what's best for us, right? Understanding the inner critic. First, let's understand that the inner critic is not our enemy. It's, well, kind of a survival tool. And quite frankly, for some of us, it may even be stuck in overdrive. And so you're constantly, your inner critic is at that higher RPM in operation, telling you you can do this, telling you you're the best, telling you that nothing is impossible. And before you know it, well, yeah, you can kind of get in trouble. Or maybe you're repeating some of the same silly things you did before because your critic, not being fully honest with you, is, well, not letting you know that some of what you're doing isn't the best for you or helping you reach your goals. Often built in childhood, and it's reinforced by past criticism and or fear. I talk a lot about habits, and that's part of, well, that habitual behavior is if your critic was pretty harsh towards you or reminded you, even as a child, when someone said you were no good and it remembered that you were no good and it repeated that you were no good, well, it can do this for several years until you change the language and the approach of that inner critic and how it's telling you you're no good. Maybe that you need to learn more is what you need to train the critic to say, or your inner critic to remind you you need to learn more prior to getting involved with something. Hey, remember when you didn't know as much? Make sure and focus on knowing more next time. See how you rephrase the need to learn more rather than you don't know enough? The critic speaks in absolutes. You always, you never. Who do you think you are? Sound familiar? I know, my critic's a little that way too. The inner critic is loudest at the edge of expansion. So, as you're hearing the you never or you always, what does that remind you of something that you've done in your life where you've never or you always? Maybe even the critical, who do you think you are? If this comes to mind and sparks a memory for you, that's great. And if it's loud, well, that means you're almost close to a breakthrough. But we have to rewire a little bit of how we hear the inner critic so that when we do get to that edge of change, we can predictively go through and cross over from that edge and not be reminded how we always or we never. Let's get into the 4-step rewiring process. First of all, you want to name the critic. Give your voice a persona or even a name, like Doubtful Dan, Scary Stacy. Hey, this is some freedom for you to give your inner critic a name. Whichever one fits best for you, feel free to apply and use it forever, indefinitely. The reason I want you to give it a name is because then I want you to disidentify from it, that you are not that voice. See, once we identify what it is and who it is, now we can say we don't want any part of that. And if Doubtful Dan shows up again, well, at least you have a name. Don't forget his name and give him a nice shiny name tag too. So when you know it shows up, you can immediately look, see the shiny name tag and go, oh, there's Doubtful Dan again. Really not interested in him being around. And you can excuse Dan immediately. Catch the thought. You know, many times just being aware of this practice, don't think of it as shame and don't invite it as shame. But the more you're in tune to what Dan or Stacy sound like, and as soon as they chime in, well, you know through a practice that you're going to develop, not only of the awareness of, oh, there they are, but how to immediately combat them and say, I'm not interested in hearing from Dan today, and kind of squash that persona. If Stacy says maybe you always start something but never finish it. Well, when you start something now and you hear Stacy chime in and go, well, here you are starting something you're never going to finish, say, I am going to finish this time, Stacy. Or no, Stacy, you're wrong. I'm finishing this time. Again, hearing that voice and combating it with your own voice, as well as with your mindset, this is what's going to kind of start to squash that inner critic, as well as to change the vocabulary that your inner critic is using, such as you always, you never, or who do you think you are? Again, by doing the previous mention, such as naming your critic and catching that thought, now we're going to start to, well, flip the frame. And each time you hear something negative, flip it. What's equally or more true than this? Just like with Stacy, well, you always start something, but you never finish it. Again, flip it to say, no, Stacy, I have started this and I'm going to finish it. I'm going to finish this time. You're specific and you're to the point. With Stacy, your inner critic, to remind them that, yes, you are following a pattern that you're about to change. You also want to replace absolutes with context and compassion. Yeah, Stacy, I know you've been around me a while, but this time I'm going to go to completion. I believe in me now, and I'm going to do something different. You'll start to find that, well, as you repeat this behavior and it becomes sort of that knee jerk habitual action against your inner critic, you'll start to hear that that inner critic calms down and gets much quieter, doesn't have so much to say anymore. Or maybe it's a little bit more fine tuned, not as vague, like, oh, you always start something. It might say, hey, remember that time that you started something and you didn't finish it? And it was this, and it was more specific because your inner critic is still going to try to get at you. It's, I wouldn't say a being, but it just knows what it wants. And that was the habitual behavior that it knew before, and it wants consistency. It wants, not that it's trying to sabotage you in not doing something, it just knows you start something and don't do it. And that's what it knows. That's what it remembers. So that's where a process of doing, fighting the idea that you never finish, and going through the belief pattern of you doing and finishing, that now is going to change your inner critic to start to see this as the comfortable pattern that you successfully always start something, do something, and accomplish something. You might start to hear that inner critic say, hey, you did it again. You finished something. Again, being critical that you did something. You want to congratulate yourself that you start hearing the voice in a more positive context, as well as maybe some compassion. Maybe there's even an appreciation in your critic's voice that, hey, you did something different, and I think I like it. Now you know you're kind of making friends with your critic, and they're more of an ally than constantly going against you. By the way, the sidebar to this is that you're forming and creating new habits that are comfortable for your mind and body to always embrace and not seem like a difficult task that you're undergoing because it's something new. Step 4 is speak as the inner ally. Create a script or a mantra of your future self and what they would say. Again, this is going to help combat your inner critic. Remember, they're comfortable with patterns. So it takes a little bit of this repetitive script or statement that you're going to repeat, letting them know this is the new norm. Use present and powerful language. I am starting this. I am doing this. and I am going to finish this. I'm going to finish this by a specific date. This is powerful language that you're combating your inner critic with, to let them know that, well, you mean business and you're going to do it this time. You're not messing around. And those old habits are going to soon be replaced by new habits that are productive and beneficial for you. You might incorporate some statements like, I am resourceful, I am learning, and I am not done. Again, incorporating these in whatever your language is to yourself to make sure that it's present and powerful. And say this maybe a couple of times, just in case yourself, that inner critic, Dan or Stacy, aren't listening or paying attention, because they will try to avoid you. Again, they like the old same, what they're used to. Now you're incorporating something new, and well, it's a little nervous, and they're slightly scared because they don't know what the outcome will be. And don't forget, they're in it with you, so they're a little nervous, and they just don't like change. But you need to share with them that this is your change, and this is the good change that they are going to have to appreciate. Part 3, replace criticism with coaching. Yes, you can be your own coach. For this particular event, absolutely. You want to shift your language to your inner critic that may say you're a mess, to what would help you right now. Good coaching asks better questions. So should your inner voice. And that's one of the things you want to start training your inner voice to do. Hey, you always start something, you never wait. Are you finishing something? Yes, I'm finishing something. I started it, I'm doing it, and I'm finishing it. Treat yourself like someone you believe in. You know, ironically, this inner voice is kind of our thoughts. So as you'll find, you're retraining yourself in the speaking and habit forming that will change your inner critic to, well, not show up so much. And when they do, they're most likely going to congratulate you, pat you on the back, and say, job well done. You're really doing great. You could do better. Hear the critic? They're still going to be there. But at least that's a little positive reinforcement that you can do better. So whatever it is that you've done, and your critic appreciates and compliments you on it, but they're also not too shy to add, you could do better, well, it's positive rather than negative. You know, when adopting an inner coach, it helped me many times to, well, get through times of pressure or doubt in business as well as in personal. I found that being nice, well, was nice to me. And I didn't get as worked up when the voice was nice to me. I didn't feel as offended when the voice was nice to me. When it did share some of the positive outcomes, like, hey, great job. Next time, do this. At least I was feeling that at the end of something was more positive than negative. And at the end, that's kind of what you want your inner critic to be there. You want them to be an ally, to be a coach, to, get you to push a little harder. You know, a coach will show you and train you on the fundamentals, but once you get it down, they're always there to pressure you to take the next step, to run a little faster, work out a little longer, spend time doing a specific move a little more, a little harder, stretch the muscle, tear the muscle, grow the muscle. Whatever it is that you're doing, yeah, your inner coach is going to push you a little bit. You need to be okay with that. But you also don't want to put yourself in a position of being too nice. Your inner coach needs to have that slight little bit of criticism. You know, you can be in a situation where your coach is really nice and it's just kind of coaxing you along. That's not really the pathway to growth. Pathway to growth is to have a little bit of, well, that criticism. So you don't want to remove the inner critic, but you want them to speak in more of a coaching fashion, like, you're doing well, take the next step. You're doing great, try a little bit more. Give it a little bit more of an edge. In closing, inner criticism is natural, but it's not the truth. Once you name it, catch it, and flip it, you'll begin to start coaching yourself forward to the success that you want, that you're striving for. Remember that practice builds a new intentional habit. And like I said, the critic will still be there. The voice will just be a small whisper, not as boisterous, and the critic will come at the end, not the entire sentence. I invite you to download Intercritic Rewire Sheet and practice catching one critical voice this week and flipping the frame. I invite you to share that flip with us at Ask Adam Live with the hashtag Rewire the Voice and share your reflection. Don't wait for a quiet mind to live boldly. Train your voice inside to speak like someone who wants you to win. Here's to taming our inner critic, hearing more of a positive than critical voice, and let us all go out to win together. Now let's make it a great day.